There we
Okay, there
go.
we go.
Okay, go ahead, Margie. Thank you, Laura.
All right. Well, thanks for coming out, everybody, tonight. I'm Margie Menzies. I'm the education director at Hawk Ridge Bird Observatory. But I'm also very well immersed in master naturalist things. In fact, I was just this afternoon um, meeting and discussing weather options for Saturday's class. I'm currently teaching a Northwoods Great Lakes class here in Duluth that meets every other Saturday. Um, well, we started the 1st of March and we'll finish in the first weekend in May. So, yeah, the weekend, we get lots of folks from all over, and yeah, the weather may be a little colorful this weekend, but we're just gonna ignore that for now and say my goal tonight is to fill you in a little bit of what's going on at Hawk Ridge and spring migration season. Um, I'm going to ask if you wouldn't mind to save your questions until the end of the program. That tends to work a little bit better for sorting things out and muting and unmuting and all that kind of good stuff. So if you want to, as Holly said earlier, if you want to put your question in the chat right away so you don't forget, you can do that for sure. So yeah, I'm gonna kind of take you through a year at Hawk Ridge in miniature and kind of give you an update on how things are going and some of the research and some of the things that we've been learning at Hawk Ridge. We've now been um, counting and banding and teaching about birds for more than 50 years. We're in year number 53 here in Duluth. So that's a long range project, which gives us all kinds of interesting information. So here we go. If I can get the slide to change. Oh, seriously. There we go. This is a picture from our fall migration site, and we'll talk about why the spring one is not at the same spot. But yeah, there you go. A little bit of a view from Hawk Ridge out across the lake in the early morning, right about sunrise there, or a little past sunrise. Anybody in your, I'll ask you to do things as we go along. I won't know if you do it or not, but I always like to do that. I'm ever the educator and trying to get the audience involved. Anybody want to make a guess as to the bird that you're seeing there gracing us in the first thing in the morning light? If you guessed bald eagle, you are right on the money. All right, come on. There we go. Yeah, so Duluth is an amazing place. And I always tell folks that ask about birding in Duluth, and I always tell them that it's pretty much a 350, a 65 day a year birding location. There's always something cool to look at here in town, and there's been all sorts of stuff going on. This has been an exciting year for a little mini eruption of owls this winter, and I can tell you more about that a little bit later on. But yeah, here's some tempters for you for the kinds of things that wander through Duluth routinely. You can test yourself out on Name That Bird. These are just some of the fun ones that we do a lot, and I'll talk more about that kind of stuff as we go. So yeah, what people think of as Hawk Ridge Nature Reserve, Hawk Ridge Bird Observatory is the organization that runs Hawk Ridge Nature Reserve, which is owned by the city of Duluth, but we are the managing agency for that. We work in partnership with the city. But yeah, that's been long known as an incredible site. And this is the spot where 50 years worth of data exists, 50 plus years of data. Historically, Hawk Ridge was once known as the place to go where you shoot birds for target practice. They say the duck hunters used to think it was great warm up for duck season, and there are all kinds of stories of bushel baskets full of dead birds, pickup loads full of dead birds. In 1937, the Duluth Bird Club gathered bushel baskets of dead birds. Um, and the Duluth Bird Club later became the Duluth Audubon Society. They'd always been interested in what was going on at Hawk Ridge. But at that point in time, things weren't protected. There was no Migratory Bird Protection Act or anything else at that point. So it was quite legal to go ahead and do that stuff. And Hawk Ridge really got its serious start by the advent of Dr. Pershing Jack Hofsland, who was the very first ornithology professor at the University of Minnesota, Duluth. And he came in the mid-50s, and he quickly got wind of what was going on out at Hawk Ridge and said, "Oh my goodness, we should be out there studying what's happening rather than shooting these birds." And so the story goes, every day he would go up to the ridge with a big old cardboard sign that said, "Please don't shoot the birds." Every day it would end up down the hill or in the bushes somewhere, but he came back every day with another one. And he got a critical mass of people interested in what was going on there. And they ultimately had to get the shooting to stop. They actually were quite creative in how they managed to break through the system. They went to the city council and convinced the city council that they should outlaw shooting within city limits of Duluth. And so they successfully got the city council to make shooting within city limits illegal, and that stopped the shooting of hawks and other birds at Hawk Ridge. They did some informal counting and some informal efforts up until 1972, when Hawk Ridge Nature Reserve was formally established, and the education, hawk watching, and banding started. 2004, and that was actually largely started by the Duluth Audubon Society that later parted ways with Hawk Ridge with slightly different missions going on. 2004, Hawk Ridge Bird Observatory was established, and the Hawk Ridge Nature Reserve was designated as the first important bird area of Minnesota. So there you go. 2025 is now our 53rd year of counting, banding, studying, protecting, and educating about birds that migrate through. And at Hawk Ridge, we count them all. Everybody thinks the raptors are all we care about, but that's not true. We count everything. So there you go. A little bit about Hawk Ridge. Historically, it's primarily been the fall site for 50 plus years, but Frank Nicoletti started at Hawk Ridge as a counter in the early 90s, and he quickly said, "Hey, if this is such an incredible fall migration site, we should be looking at what's happening here in the spring as well," and started informally doing some spring counting. And a few years back, we got a nice grant to a nice donation to start a consistent spring count. And that started in 2018. We have funding for 10 years to do that, and the plan for certain is to continue to do that past that point, because and some would argue, one of our counters, Sean McLaughlin, would say the spring count is even more important than the fall count, because the spring are the breeding birds that are coming back, and those are the ones that we really hope will be successful. But anyway, why is Hawk Ridge such an amazing place? Well, the boreal forest is a huge place, and most of the birds that are coming through this area, this is kind of the beginning of the Mississippi Flyway, or at least the US portion of the Mississippi Flyway. And every year, 3 to 5 billion, yeah, wrap your head around that, 3 to 5 billion birds leave the boreal forest to head south. And yeah, we know this from a variety of different things. Here's a really bird geeky thing to do. Yes, it's true. You can look at bird migration by watching weather radar, and you can take a look at that. This image in the lower right hand of the screen, it has all those lovely little green and blue circles. Those are local weather radar. And the reason that they're lighting up like that is because of migration. Um, and there's enough stuff there. It's not genuine weather. Genuine weather looks red to yellow to orange, but it's enough to trigger the local radar system. And so you can, yes, it's true, you can geek out and look at weather radar. I do it regularly at night. I'm a bird bander, and it helps me gauge what it might be like when I go out to band in the morning to have an idea what the traffic looks like at night. Most of the songbirds that I band migrate at night. And so that's a that's a really strange geeky thing that I do all the time, but you can do it too. And the image on the left here is a demonstration that a lot of birds use this central flyway. This is a map that was constructed from 11 years worth of spring migratory data of birds heading north, coming in through Texas and heading north. And you can actually see this is the flyway. They say that 60 to 75% of the birds that migrate in North America use this flyway. It's the biggest one on the continent. So this is a big deal. And in the fall, it's a great spot. Things tend to stay in habitat as long as they possibly can as they migrate. They'll use bodies of water. They'll go around weather systems when they have to. They'll use mountain ridges. And like I say, they'll stay in habitat as long as they can because that's familiar to them and they can hunt successfully and fuel up on the migratory pathway as they head south. And the birds heading south come both from the east and the west side, which tends to make them hit right at the top of Lake Superior. And most birds will not migrate over water because there's nothing to eat. There's no place to land. You can't rest anywhere. If you hit the top of Lake Superior at that point, you've got 160 miles of water to fly over straight if you go right straight across, and most of them aren't going to do that. So they will track either to the east or to the west. If they choose to move to the west, that'll bring them right straight down through Duluth. And Lake Superior actually works like a funnel to consolidate that whole line of birds right along the North Shore and bring them right straight through Duluth. Now in the spring, and we're going to talk about the spring migration, they're coming from the south, and we don't have that same funneling. In the fall, we annually see usually somewhere between 60 to 75,000 raptors by themselves and hundreds of thousands of other birds migrating through, and that funneling pushes them right straight through Duluth. In the spring, we really don't have that same funneling happening because there isn't a Lake Superior in the middle there to push them in one particular way. So they're a little more spread out. The spring migration is not the same as the fall migration. The fall migration numbers, at least for a lot of birds, will be more. We'll see more of them in the fall because of the funneling than we do in the spring. However, there are definitely interesting stories in the spring, and there are a number of birds that we see many more of in the spring than we do in the fall. So we'll tell you more about that story. But yeah, that same funneling isn't quite the same. So the birds of Hawk Ridge and of Duluth We've got a nice little kettle forming here. Sometimes they get rather large. It's not unusual for us to see kettles of birds of 400, 800, even 1,000 birds in them coming through on a busy day during the fall migration. It's not unusual for us to have a couple of days where just raptors, the numbers are going to be like 12,000, 15,000, 18,000. Anybody want to wrap your brain around? I'll give you the statistical most counted in a single day number. And it was one species of bird. You'll have to think about that one. Which bird species did we count this many of? Maximum count. Make an estimate in your mind. How much was it? Are you ready? Here we go. Yeah, the most counted in a single day was 101,699 birds. They were all broadwing hawks. In general, we count more broadwing hawks than any other species of raptor, and sometimes more than other species of birds. But yeah, that is a record that still stands, and that was from 2003. September the 15th, 2003. 101,699 birds coming through in a single day. And that was just the broadwing hawks. If you add in everything else that flew that day, the total was well over 103,000 birds. So lots of birds. It can be just an incredible thing to see. So in the springtime, I've mentioned, we don't count at the same spot. The reason for that are there's several of them. One is that our fall site is a little pushed inland, so it's not as easy to see things coming from the south in Duluth as the sites that we do use. The lake has a lot to do with stuff. And we count in one of two locations. You can see these little red dots on the map. In the spring, we either count at West Skyline Parkway by Enger Tower, or we count at West Skyline Parkway right in front of Thompson Hill, the rest stop at the top of the hill when you're just coming into Duluth and all of a sudden see the whole harbor of Duluth at your feet. We'll use one of those two spots because in addition to being a little inland and not as easy to see things coming from the south, the road that Hawk Ridge on East Skyline Parkway is closed it's gated from December through the end of May, and they don't plow that road generally. So accessibility would be a problem for our counters and folks anyway. So combination has us using those sites. Now, why do we use two? Does somebody have a question? I heard a little something there. That's okay. Never mind. So yeah, why do we use two different locations? Well, it turns out that the birds move a little differently depending on what's happening. So if the wind is blowing really hard off the big lake from the east or the northeast, the birds will typically stay on the Wisconsin side and they'll ride the St. Louis River and up the corridor and the split between well, it's pretty much the route that Highway 35 takes up through the middle there, up the ridge to the top. The birds will follow that, and it's much easier to count them up at Thompson Hill. Otherwise, all other winds will usually be at a little historical marker on the roadside called Rice's Point, which is actually, can you see the arrow? Somebody nod your head if you can see the arrow that I'm or if it's not showing. Is it showing? Okay, good. Then I know it works for everybody. This is actually historically the area that's called Rice's Point, but the historical markers up here, because you can see the spot. This was, yes, this was a wetland at one point in time. Not so much anymore. But yeah, that's Rice's Point, so it's a little bit about that. Any other kind of wind, we will be there because we can see we've got a really nice view of the whole area and can track things coming from the south nice and easily. So yeah, we start the spring count. Like I say, we started the latest version of that in 2018. So we're in year number 8 of the 10-year spring cycle, but we had some before that. From 1997 till 2006, we had a Frank Nicoletti, the guy that's here in the middle, um, started that spring count then and did a nice paper for the Loon and the MOU um, magazine, research magazine at that point, saying, "Hey, we should be tracking spring migration in Duluth just as well as the fall migration." So yeah, we start March the 1st and go through the end of May every spring. And in the spring, we don't see quite as many raptors. Average per year is about 24,000 raptors that are counted every spring. We say that Duluth is a really good spot for counting soaring raptors. And that's largely because of the hillside and the remnant continental rift hillside that we have here in Duluth. Anytime you have a steep hill, you're going to have lift, and those birds will actually use that lift to get some height moving through. And so the soaring birds in particular are really, really good at using that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that kind of stuff. But yeah, March the 1st counting can have a number of different kinds of conditions. This isn't even March the 1st. This is March the 31st in 2019. It's a little different this year, not quite as snowy. We're only on March the 11th, and it's pretty clear up there. This is Rice's Point, but it can still be pretty chilly in the early part of March when we're counting. But it's an amazing thing to be watching, and I love when the migration starts in the spring because, yeah, we all know that spring seems to drag like a snail in Minnesota, but there is all kinds of stuff happening, and these birds are not listening to that. They're moving as they go. So, time to get your brain actively involved again. Here's a picture. The lower left-hand corner is a picture of John Richardson, who counted for us for a couple of years. And there are 4 birds in here. Your job, I will tell you who they are. Your job is to figure out the order. Who's going to come first? Who's going to come second? Who's going to come third? And so forth. Because migration is a lot like a parade. There's the beginning of the parade, the middle of the parade, and the end of the parade. And so, yeah, I want you to think about who comes first, who comes next, and so forth. So starting from upper left-hand corner, these are trumpeter swans. All right. This guy down here is an osprey. Where's that one going to fall? Here's a northern harrier. And over here, this is a red-tailed hawk. So again, you got a trumpeter swan bunch there. You've got an osprey. You've got a northern harrier, and you've got a red-tailed hawk. Put them in order in your mind. Who's coming first? Who's coming second, third, and fourth? Give you a do, 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 do. Do, do, do. There you go. And then we will tell you the real story, or at least the usual story. Are you ready? All right, who's gonna be first? How many are gonna vote for osprey. How many are gonna vote for northern harrier, red tail? Turns out it's the trumpeter swans that are gonna be the first to run. Good, 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 if you got that one. Second is gonna be red-tailed hawk. Third will be northern harrier. And those osprey guys, they wait until more towards the end. And there's good reasons for all of that. And we'll get into some of that. So hope you have fun with that kind of stuff. Here's a graphic that I did a few years back about who comes when. In the fall, we typically see the young birds first. They're kind of the parent birds have some sort of conversation that probably goes a little like this. All right, it's been good to know you. Hope you do okay. You're gonna have to be on your own now. Make good choices now. Scram. And those birds are on their own to migrate. And generally, we'll see the young birds first in the fall. And then later on in the season, we'll see the females. And eventually, in the end, we'll see the males. In the spring, it's the exact reverse. In the spring, we will see the adults first. And so these green bars are adult birds, and the blue bars are young birds coming later, at least on the ones we can see. There are a couple on here. You might have noticed American kestrels do not have a blue bar. What? Aren't there any young birds coming north? Well, yeah, there are, but we can't tell the young birds from the old birds at that stage. So we just have a green bar saying, yeah, the kestrels are coming. And you can see the kestrels are not exactly the beginning of the parade, but they're right in the front. But yeah, the beginning of the parade usually is bald eagles, golden eagles, rough-legged hawks, northern goshawks. Now, we don't see very many northern goshawks in the spring, and there's good reason for that. They are not good soaring birds. They are forest hunters, and they are built for speed and maneuverability, which tends to make them come up short on the ability to soar really efficiently. So birds like accipiters, and that used to include sharpshin hawks, Cooper's hawks, and northern goshawks. That used to be the accipiters, and they are, I always say, if you're going to be a raptor, you're usually a flapper or a soarer. They are flappers because they're built for speed and maneuverability. They just this last fall took the northern goshawks and the Cooper's hawks out of the accipiters, and put them back in a historical category that they used to occupy called Astra. Now the sharpshin hawks are the only remaining accipiters in North America. Geeky bird things. Oh, it can keep you going for months on that stuff. But yeah, others that are not good soaring birds, kestrels are not good soaring birds. Merlins don't soar well. Peregrines don't soar well. All those falcons, again, built for speed and maneuverability, but not for soaring. So those are birds that we typically see less of in the spring, whereas soaring birds like broadwing hawks, turkey vultures, red-tailed hawks, rough-legged hawks, bald eagles, golden eagles. Red-shouldered hawks are very occasional. They're mostly out of range here. And same thing with Swainson's hawks, but both of those are good soaring birds as well. So yeah, the ones that you're more likely to see on the front side are going to be those good soaring birds. The northern goshawks, well, we hardly see any anymore, it seems like. But Duluth is still the hot spot for them. But being non-soaring birds, you don't typically see them up in those big kettles. Those guys are more likely to hug the trees and hunt as they're flying and be much harder to see. So lots of stories, lots of stories. Every species of bird has its own story. So when do we say that spring migration begins? Well, it's mid to late February if you're a bald eagle. And like I said earlier, the spring count officially starts March the 1st, but it's not unusual for the bald eagles to get moving earlier in February, and they were again this year. Um, Bald eagles are one that we typically see more in the spring than we do in the fall. Now, for bird trivia here, bald eagles are North American birds only. This is the only place in the world you'll see them, and they're pretty much northern North America birds, although you will see them pretty much all through the continental US. But once you get past the Texas-Mexico border, you're not going to see much for bald eagles. They're going to disappear. And you're going to not see them anymore. So the bald eagles, we always say here in Duluth, it's the best spot in the world to see the bald eagle migration coming through. And it typically peaks about usually somewhere in the neighborhood of March the 17th to like the 21st, 22nd. We've had record flights. In fact, if you look down here, and you don't have to read through all these stats, but we had a single day flight of 1,206 on March the 17th in 2022. Amazing. We know how to do St. Patty's Day in Duluth. And yeah, it can be just incredible. Just imagine for yourself kettles of bald eagles, and you can see one over here, and there's another one, and there's another one, and another one, and you can scan the sky with your binoculars, and at any particular moment in time, easily count more than 100 just soaring through the skies in Duluth. Not unusual. Today, well, it's been sort of kicking up this week. We had the last 5 days or so, we've had 70, 70, 80. Yesterday, there was a little bit more than 200. Today, at about 3:30, I put the slide in for the maximum count for the bald eagles for the day, and it was still at 200. By 6 o'clock, that changed, and you'll see the number that it changed to very shortly. So yeah, we see bald eagles, and we also see golden eagles. Now, most people think about golden eagles as Western birds, but there are golden eagles. There is an Eastern population of golden eagles that's in Quebec and Eastern Canada, and they will come migrating through. We'll get some both from the East and the West. And they come through, they're in smaller numbers than the bald eagles, but still a very common bird for us to see in the spring and the fall. We see typically a few more in the fall than we do in the spring, but it's very, very fun. And yes, the bald eagle numbers went up today, and so did the golden eagle numbers. We see lots of different things going on. We've got lots of, in addition to the counting, which in and of itself is baseline data that gives us an idea. 1 or 2 years doesn't tell you much about what's happening with the population, but 50 plus tells you a lot about what's going on with the population of birds. Now, the bird that's hunting here and taking on a bird every bit the same size as it, and probably a little bit bigger, is a merlin. This is a falcon, and these guys frequently stay in the Duluth area. These are birds that handle interaction with people fairly well. Not all birds do, but merlins seem to do okay, and it's not unusual to find their nests in downtown Duluth. And this particular merlin was feasting on a pigeon, that was every bit as big as it was, probably a little bit bigger. The reason I stuck the slide in here is because we have had a research project, an ongoing one that was started by a grad student a few years back, who was having us, if we captured falcons and birds of prey, having us pull a few breast feathers from the bird, and there are thousands of them, so they don't miss one or two, and sending those in and having processed and finding out the levels of mercury in those feathers. And mercury accumulation was definitely measured, and it was higher in some species of birds rather than others. And it turns out the birds that had the highest levels of mercury in their feathers were birds that typically ate other birds, like merlins, falcons, sharp-shinned hawks. Those guys are the ones that had higher levels of mercury than, say, your average red tail or even bald eagle. Interesting. And so they've been doing some follow-up studies with that. And I banned songbirds, and we did a follow-up study with pulling feathers from songbirds, being the ones we thought these birds typically ate. They concentrated more on the aquatic environment, and we pulled lots of feathers, which are still sitting at the processor waiting to be processed. But they did do some initial running, and some of the songbirds that have ended up having higher levels of mercury include birds like rusty blackbirds, northern water thrushes had higher levels. Most had fairly low levels, but those birds were higher. So yeah, so we've got a variety of different kinds of studies that I'll kind of tell you a little bit about as we go along. So that merlin is a bird that would have higher levels of mercury in its feathers because of their diet. We see typically more turkey vultures in the spring than we do in the fall. Average count in the fall is less than the count in the spring by quite a bit. So lots of turkey vultures. Somebody said earlier they saw their first turkey vulture down there. We have not yet seen the first turkey vulture in Duluth. And red-tailed hawks. This is a fascinating story. These are birds that come through. And yes, it's true. Both pictures here are of red-tailed hawks. And you're going to say, well, where's the red tail on the one on the right? Well, it's still red. It's just that when you get it from underneath, you're seeing the white under tail feather side, and you're not getting the red side. So I always tell folks, teach you how to recognize a red-tailed hawk from underneath. Doesn't usually involve the tail. We have different varieties of red-tailed hawks. This is how a red-tailed hawk typically looks that flies through. If you're lucky, you can see that red tail, but the other things that stick out are this belly band, the black, this is called a patagial patch, or right there at the shoulders, and then this comma out here. So these are the things that you see that will say that's a red-tailed hawk. Now, this one looks different than this one. They are both red-tailed hawks. This one is called a dark morph. And there are dark morphs of a number of different birds, but red tails are pretty infamous for that. And traditional knowledge has said that dark morph birds are restricted to the Western population. Well, it turns out at Hawk Ridge, we see a fair number and catch a fair number of dark morph hawks. So where the heck are they coming from? Are they Western wanderers? Calurus is the species name that we give for the Western population. Is it a dark morph borealis, which is the Eastern version? But the traditional knowledge has said, no, it can't possibly be borealis. We have all of the evidence that says, nope, there isn't any such thing. Is there a hybrid going on, or is there something else? Well, and there's a bird, a subspecies called a beta cola, and we'll talk about a beta cola here. A beta cola, if you look at this graphic here, this kind of tells you this is the Calurus, the Western version of the red-tailed hawk. KR stands for criders, that's a subspeciation, which some would argue should be a separate species altogether from red tails, but that hasn't been agreed upon. In the east, here's borealis. We have a population that lives up here in the breeding area, but they migrate to the south in the wintertime, whereas a lot of these just stay put. It's the Abeticola ones that look different, and the hypothesis by Frank Arbander, who got a grad student to take this one on, he said, I think it's the Abeticola folks that have the dark morph. So here's an Abeticola. See how it's buffy through here rather than this kind of pure white? That's an earmark of an Abeticola, a bird that lives in the north in the east, but migrates to the south during the winter time because it's just too rough up there for them to stay. So our graduate student took on trying to catch a few Abeticola birds and dark morph birds and took all kinds of measurements, took pictures of all the plumage, took blood samples because there's a great DNA database for all of these subspeciations of red-tailed hawks, and also put some satellite transmitters on. And this is Allie, the grad student. She caught a dark morph, a Abeticola. That one actually was down in the Twin Cities. We keep an eye out to get reports from all over the state. And they went down and they did all of the sampling on this dark morph species and put a satellite transmitter on it that is solar powered. And here is what happened. Immediately, that bird continued west and hung out down in central Wisconsin for a while. And then later on, went on up into Canada and near Lake Winnipeg and bred up there. And so they were able to compare the blood samples and the DNA they caught from these birds. She transmitted 4 possible ones, had evidence that the bird was breeding near Lake Winnipeg. So it's clearly in that population. DNA was a perfect match for a Abeticola. So yeah, the whole Borealis does not have dark morph has pretty well been debunked by this grad student in this study, and saying, yeah, it is the Abeticola subspecies that are having a dark morph version. It is not Western birds. It's not a hybrid. It is very definitely Abeticola birds. So that's pretty cool. Who would have thunk it? Yep, there is our northern goshawk. This is a bird where historically we've seen more here than probably anywhere else in the world, and we still do, but their numbers have been way decreased. It used to be that we could expect 300 or 400 of these every fall, and boy, the last few years we've been lucky to even hit. The 10-year average has dropped. Well, historically, in all 50 years, the average for that historical number was 527 average flight through every year. The last 10 years, the average is 160. Last year, there were less than 60 that came through. So something is going on with these birds. In the springtime, we see lots of other things. We see sandhill cranes come through. I love that. The peregrines come through. We have resident peregrines that now pretty much overwinter in the Duluth Harbor area. And we see a lot of peregrines coming through and a lot of chasing pigeons and kinds of behaviors with the count. We were just watching them yesterday in the morning. Um, Here's another spring visitor that I dearly love when they come through. The pelicans will stage on the St. Louis River. They are breeders, but they breed to the north, mostly in Canada, although there are a few lakes in northern Minnesota that do have white pelicans on them. These are the American white pelicans. And yep, here's some more bird trivia for you. These are the birds with the second largest wingspan in North America. Who's the bird with the first? That would be California condors. And the California condors only beat the pelicans by about an inch. So these birds are huge winged and so incredibly graceful when they fly through. And they stage on the St. Louis River because they wait for the lakes further north to thaw before they head up there to breed. The river will be open, and so they can hang out on the St. Louis River. This picture on the upper left is from Chambers Grove City Park in Duluth, and it's a great place to go in the springtime to see the pelicans. They'll roost there overnight because it's a kind of little island space that protects them a little better from predators. But yeah, the pelicans are one of my favorites, both fall and spring. But you can tell the spring pelicans because they'll have those big lumps on their beaks. They won't have them in the fall, but they will in the spring. That's breeding. That's pre-breeding stuff that says, hey. And we will also see the spring migration of songbirds. You can test yourself out on your knowledge of the identification of little guys too. The shorebirds come through as well as all the warblers and flycatchers. It's just glorious. So here you go. This is the 2024 numbers for the spring count. Yeah, they counted close to 26,000, well, more than 26,000 raptors. I don't expect you to read through all of that, but the birds that we saw the most of in 2024 were in the raptors, broad-winged hawks, 11,607, 5,833 bald eagles. So well represented there. Here is today's count. Next slide. Alrighty. Yeah, check it out. I told you that by about 3 o'clock, the bald eagle number was a little over 200. By 6 o'clock, when they finally stopped the count, it was 586. Whoa. That may end up being our big count for the season. We don't know. Last year, we didn't have any counts that high. Our highest count last year was 400 birds, but we've had several years where we've had more than 1,000 in a day. But the last few years, it's been more spread out. So it'll be interesting to see if this is the high count for the season. But those golden eagles, they weren't slacking either. In fact, ooh, that's a tie. 57 golden eagles is a tie for the highest single day count for golden eagles, which I was part of in 2000 and or now actually it beats. It's a new record. New record for high in a single day for spring count. The last one was 2019 at 53. So a brand new high for golden eagles came through today at 57 birds. So there is excitement happening in Duluth. Lots of amazing birds coming through. Um, we tend to know who our summer residents are, but summer's the shortest month of the shortest season of all of them, and we get to know those birds. We do what's called map banding at Hawk Ridge, which means that we set the nets in the same locations every year and we catch the same birds over and over again. If they're successful, they'll often come back to the same spot. And we have birds that have come back 4, 5, 6, 7 years in a row. So it's fascinating to see that. Many of these little guys, chestnut-sided warblers here. I see chestnut-sided warblers. I was telling Holly and Cindy about taking birders on international tours through Hawk Ridge. One of the wonderful things I get to call part of my job. And we always see chestnut-sided warblers in Central and South America. Um, they fly that kind of distance and come back to nest in the exact same spot year after year after year. It is mind-boggling. And the birds that typically win the prize for coming back consistently year after year are little American redstarts. Tiny little things that come back. I've had returns on those guys of 7 years in a row. They've come back to the same spot. Just think about the hazard of flying a 2 to 3 thousand mile flight there and back again on your own power, not hopping on a jet. So yeah, that's amazing. How are we doing on time here? Yeah, I told you I can blab. We've gotten through spring, but now we got to talk fall. Oh, turn it on. Fast forward. But fall migration is amazing too. Um, it begins earlier than you think. We typically start fall migration counting August the 15th, but I will tell you from banding experience that it is moving much sooner than that. Late July, beginning of August, many of those long distance songbirds are already boogieing. Shorebirds, I mean, many of those shorebirds that fly just enormous distances to all the way from the Arctic to the Antarctic have about a month in their breeding territory, get the job done, and then head north again. So it's the shorebirds are also moving July and boogieing right on through. So at Hawk Ridge, with the raptor focus, yeah, we don't start it until the 15th, but us passer and banders are out there catching those birds that are migrating. When we end our map sampling, which is MAPS study, MAPS, by the way, is an acronym that stands for Monitoring Avian Productivity and Survivorship. By setting the nets in the same locations and catching the same birds, and we keep track of which birds are caught in which nets, that can give us statistically a way to tie how successful their breeding has been by the number of young birds that we catch in the late breeding season after they've fledged. So we can say, okay, here's a pair that we typically catch in this area, and we caught 12 young birds here. So that probably means we've got, at least this much survival out of this group. So that's what it stands for. As soon as we're done with maps, and the last day that we can do map banding is August 8th, then we set the nets for fall migration and we band every day that we possibly can for the fall. And yeah, the birds that are moving early are your flycatchers. Some of the warblers are early movers. Wilson's flycatchers or Wilson's warblers will move early. Some of the others as well. So yeah, the parade starts with the warblers too. And we keep track of that. From 1972 to the present, we've counted over 3 million raptors at Hawk Ridge. And yeah, this slide I didn't update needs to be near number 53. When you update slides, you don't always catch them all. Sorry. Busted. Um, Common nighthawks are one of the things that we look for with great anticipation in the fall. We, again, Duluth is probably the capital of more birds counted in Duluth in the fall for common nighthawks than anywhere else in the world. Um, the interesting thing about nighthawks is A, they're not active at night, and B, they're not hawks. They're related to whippoorwills, or the goose or the goat suckers. They are not hawks, but they typically come through in a really 2 to 3 week window of time. Usually it's the last 2 weeks of August, and they look for that perfect conditions and they'll just come down the shore like crazy. Um, in August of 2020, 27,580 were counted through the whole day at Hawk Ridge. Most of the time, you count more of them at dawn and dusk. And Steve Colby, a former Hawk Ridge counter, has been researching common nighthawks and has they've been a species of birds that's been declining in much of their range, but his numbers show that at least the birds that are migrating through this area seem to have a fairly stable population. So there's some good news in there from the numbers of birds that between Steve Colby and Hawk Ridge have been counting for common nighthawks. But they're beautiful to watch fly. Those little white stripes on the wings are very obvious when they come through. And it's just something to see. So yeah, if you have a need to be up the North Shore in late August, be watching for the nighthawks as they migrate south. Here is kind of the fall parade and who starts early. Osprey, we were talking about them being one of the later arrivals in spring. They're later in spring because they hang on the Gulf, and again, they're waiting for the lakes to unfreeze. Not much point in trying to hunt for fish on a frozen lake, so they'll wait for them to unfreeze before they move. Sharp-shinned hawks are some of the first birds to get going in the fall, along with bald eagles. That's an interesting story. Bald eagles, we will see from the beginning to the end of the fall migration. I want you to think on that one for a little bit, and we'll come back to that story. See if you can figure out why we see them all the way through. Osprey, you can recognize them partly by the bent wings and these dark patches at the elbows. Interesting thing about osprey, if you think back to that spring parade with the green and the blue bar graphs on there, the osprey have an interesting strategy. Their young birds that aren't going to breed will stay down by the Gulf of Mexico until they're ready to breed. They won't, and a lot of birds, the young ones will go north with the adult population and not be able to breed. The osprey have said, hey, why go to all that work when we're not going to breed anyway? Let's just stay here and hang out on the Gulf and wait until we're old enough to go north. And that's what they do. We know that from banding information. It's rare to catch one of those young birds in the fall. It's rare to catch an osprey. Anyway, we tease our banders that they should put a goldfish pond out in the middle of the banding station, but haven't done it yet and probably wouldn't work very well anyway. So, kestrels and dragonflies, they have a dual migration. Yes, it's true. There are dragonflies that migrate in the fall, and the kestrels, when we catch them back at the banding station in the fall, 9 times out of 10, those kestrels are going to have dragonfly goo on their beaks because they physically hunt as they fly, flying along and grab that dragonfly, munch as they go, and keep on flying. It's amazing to watch. You can actually watch them do that. And so the timing of the green darner, that's what kind of dragonfly this is. When the green darners are coming through, guess what? The kestrels aren't dummies. They're going to track with the green darners and fly right along with them and chow down as they go. Here are our famous broadwing hawks. You can recognize them. They're the smallest of the soaring birds that we have. And if you look at these guys, these are all broadwing hawks, and they don't really have any identifying marks on them except for that black edge on the wing and a striped tail. There's no belly band, there's no patagial patch or commas on the wing. So they're pretty easy to recognize, but they're small. And when they make those huge kettles of 800 birds, 600 to 800 birds, it can be something to see. But you thank the good Lord for bald eagles at that point, because you can see the bald eagles in the kettle. You can't see these guys until you put your binoculars up and you go, oh, behind all those bald eagles are a lot of broadwing hawks, and they look like a swarm of angry bees back there, soaring away. So, broadwing hawks. Usually we see more of these birds as far as the raptors go than any other raptor species. They are long distance migrators. They're going at least to Central America, if not South America. See a lot of broadwing hawks. I was just in Colombia in February, and yeah, we were seeing broadwing hawks, and it's so cool to go to the tropics and see the birds that you know so well from home. Sharp-shinned hawks, lots of them. We usually count more of those guys, a band more of those than any of the others. These are birds that we catch a lot of. And just to give you a size comparison, this is Lula, who's a lot older than that now. She'd probably kill me if she knew I had this slide in the thing, because she's well in her teenage years now. But just to give you, she was probably about 5 when this picture was taken. And you can see that a sharp-shinned hawk is not too much of a handful. And you're probably wondering, why in the world is there a turkey picture on this slide? Well, turns out we had another researcher, Lisa Brule, who was doing a study on what these migrating birds eat when they're migrating. We have good evidence of what they're doing when they're breeding. That was a well answered question, but what do they eat when they're migrating? Nobody really knew. So she proposed a study where she would try and figure out what they were eating. So when they caught a bird back at the banding station, they would do what's called a cloacal swab. In other words, take some toilet paper in the form of a Q-tip to the outspout where things are coming out and see what you get for DNA. Interesting story. Turned out that they were doing some spring migration banding and caught some sharp-shinned hawks, did cloacal swabs, and not one but several had wild turkey DNA in their poop. Okie dokie, Smokey. There's no way this bird is taken on a turkey and winning. So what the heck is the story here? The first hypothesis was, okay, this is early April into May. Maybe it was baby turkeys. Well, a little further information found that baby turkeys are usually born in Minnesota in late May, early June. Whoops, not baby turkeys. Huh. Well, what else could be the story? Well, hunting season for turkeys is in Minnesota, April and May. Okay. Well, no one had ever observed sharp-shinned hawks eating carrion, but that probably is the explanation. They were finding either gut piles of wild turkey that had been gutted in the field, or they were finding dead turkeys that hadn't been found by the people that shot them. And so, yeah, fascinating. Who would have thunk it? We now know that sharp-shinned hawks are not adverse to taking a little carrion on the migration. Makes sense. I mean, opportunity knocks, and you're trying to hunt in unfamiliar territory, take advantage of what you find, but nobody had ever seen it. But we have evidence now that they can do that, and apparently do. We banned a lot of owls. Um, at Hawk Ridge. There's a point in the season from mid-September till through the middle of October where there's pretty much banding happening of birds 24/7. Raptors during the daytime. I'm out there early in the morning for the passerine banding, and the owls are going all night long. And we typically band more northern saw-whet owls than any other kind of owl. The number's a little over 1,100 on average every year. That's a lot of little tiny, very cute northern saw-whet owls. But we also catch, usually somewhere around 100 long-eared owls as well. Um, and northern saw-whet owls, we have learned they're kind of regional migrators. They can move a fair distance, but they tend to go more east than they go south. Here's a map of birds that were Hawk Ridge banded and then recovered or found later dead with the bands on from Hawk Ridge. And you can see that these birds were all banded right here. They didn't go too far to the south for the most part. They just mostly went east. And birds, we actually had a saw-whet owl that was recaptured on Vancouver Island in British Columbia. That was a Hawk Ridge banded bird. So lots of fun research going on with recaptures of the birds. That's when you really start to learn things about these birds. Where are they going? How long does it take them to get there? Do they stay in the same places? Do they come back to the same places? Do they winter in the same locations? All of those are possible answers from putting on little aluminum bands. We will also get other birds. Occasionally we'll get a short-eared owl. That's the record is, I think, about 5 over history, but every now and again we get one. And this guy, this is a fun one. Hawk Ridge is too far north for screech owls, but the owl banders were out and they kept hearing screech owl calls, and they're like, what? And in order to catch owls at night, we do play their spring calls. Now, that doesn't make any sense at all. It's fall, it's not breeding season. Why does playing the calls get the birds to come in? It does. It works. I don't know if the females just kind of say, who's this nut? I got to go check this out or what. But the owlbanders heard the screech owl and they said, well, what the heck? Let's try playing the screech owl call and see if it will come in. And by golly, it did. They caught it, banded it, let it go, and caught it every year, same bird, same location, every year, 5 years running. We were waiting for evidence of it, finding a mate successfully and raising young. Never got that. So either it finally gave up on the region and said, I got to get out of here, or it died trying. But definitely not a bird that we should have been catching regularly. So things are moving around. Climate change is shifting some things.
Hey, Margie, um,
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm just conscious that we're 15 minutes from sort of our official end time. Would you mind just taking a look at the questions that are in the chat and making
Nope.
sure those get answered, and then you can come back to your slideshow?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty close to the end here. I think
Oh,
I'll just
okay.
rip through to the end.
Okay,
We
that's
do have
great.
late season migrants. Later season typically are the bald eagles, rough-legged hawks, red-tailed hawks, and golden eagles. Um, we banded and satellite transmitted a golden eagle that used to winter down by Arkansas and go all the way up north of Great Bear Lake to breed every year. Amazing, just amazing. Yeah, fall of 2024. Total number of raptors was 59,521, a little under average, but a lot of birds had better than average years. Turkey vultures, sharpshins, bald eagles, kestrels, merlins, peregrines, golden eagles, and rough-legged hawks. For the most part, most of these birds are birds that do okay with humans, with the exception of rough-legged and golden eagle. All the rest of these are pretty human tolerant birds. The ones that are below average are the ones that are less human tolerant. So that's an interesting thing to take a look at. Um, the highest counts, the top 10 for all of the species are listed here from top to bottom. Blue jays won the top of the heap at 46,000, and on down. Actually, 46,469 Blue Jays this year. Last year we had nearly 80,000, and they were the number one last year as well. So that's interesting to look at and watch the changes from year to year. This was a crappy breeding year for birds, or 2023 summer was wet and cold and hard for birds to breed. There was not a whole lot of success. Yeah, and we know a little bit about the idea of why do we want to keep track of birds and why do we want to know about success stories? Well, we know that we've lost nearly 3 billion birds in 50 years of what used to be there. And you've probably seen the press about that. Some of the hardest hit are blue jays. 1 in 4 lost. 1 in 4 rose-breasted grosbeaks. Common birds that are everywhere. So it does my heart good to see those huge blue jay numbers in the fall. They're being successful somewhere. And these are predominantly young birds. Blue jays are not much for migrants, but the young birds are dispersing. They're chasing their dreams and taking off on their own and not really knowing where they're going. So they just go. And they end up heading south. Um, we see lots and lots and lots of people at Hawk Ridge. And in the fall, we regularly get birds up from the banding station where we give people a short little demonstration on the bird. And if things are going well, we'll let the people let the birds go and send them on their way. Um, we have education programming both in the fall and the spring, and full-time education staff to work with people for all kinds of things. I do lots of programming year-round, but I'm the only full-time staff person in education year-round. Average, actually, this needs to be updated. The road that we have cameras and things, it's the traffic on the road is 80,000 plus every fall. So there are a lot of people coming through. And I will leave you with a little inspiration. This is actually a 2020 video because during 2020 we weren't letting people other than staff release the birds. It was kind of a sad period of time, but there's nothing sad about this bird being released, and I was delighted to have the honor. So here you go. We'll end with a little demo for you of the the bird being released back on its journey south. If that isn't magic. And you're going to get to see it again because it always makes me do it twice. So too bad, so sad. You're going to have to watch it again. There you go. Now it's time for questions. Thanks, everybody. As you can tell, I told you in the beginning I could talk for 3 days. I'm not going to. I am going to have pity on you. And I will go to chat now and see what we got. Um, Yep. Did I say that Duluth sees more goshawks than anywhere else in the world? That may not formally be true. Goshawks are circumpolar birds, but they've split them off, and there's American goshawks and now European goshawks, more lumping and splitting in the bird world. So technically, yeah, we probably do see more American goshawks at Hawk Ridge than anywhere else in the world because the ones that are not in North and South America are not American goshawks. They're going to be European ones. So yeah, I'd say that's true. Which songbirds that breed on the North Shore migrate furthest distance? Um, I would say a lot of the warblers, when I'm in South and Central America, I'm always seeing yellow warblers and redstarts and chestnut-sideds and bay-breasted warblers. Oh my goodness, you have to work like crazy up here to see bay-breasted warblers. No problem in the tropics. They're everywhere. And it's like, okay. And actually, fascinatingly enough, I learned that bay-breasted warblers are fruit eaters when they're in the tropics. When they're in the north, they're spruce budworm specialists. So they changed their diet altogether. Yeah. Yeah, this one about pictures of ospreys. I can tell you in outright candor, I did not take hardly any of the pictures in here, so I can't tell you a thing about lenses and magnification and spotting scopes. Our counters are amazing, and most of them are fantastic photographers, and they can do all kinds of crazy things, and I can't speak to that. Sorry. I wish I had better answers, but I will tell you that they take a lot of wonderful pictures. Um, I think I got them all. Does anybody else have other questions? Happy to turn the slideshow off and
Yeah, let's do that. Go to gallery view. And then
there we
if folks
go.
have questions, feel free to unmute and just
Yeah,
ask directly at this
unmute and
point.
chime in. And hi, Michelle.
Mhm. Well, I have one, Margie, and maybe you already said this, but um, I mean, ostensibly any day of the week during like the fall migration, a person like me could just drive up there and you'll have staff there doing counts and we can
Yep.
ask questions and
Yeah,
okay.
7 days a week, both the fall and the spring. You're welcome at the count sites at either location. The other thing that you can do, there's wonderful armchair birding that you can do. You can actually go on our website and you can get live count updates up to the moment of what they're
Mm,
seeing that day. Um, but it does pay to pay attention to the weather
mhm,
and go in the fall when the winds from the north or the northwest or the
mm,
west, those are going to be best movement days um, in the fall. and it's worth paying attention to that. And the same is true in the spring, but there you want to be looking for south, southeast, southwest winds. Today was a good south wind, and that blew, yeah,
Mm,
586 bald eagles. And
that's
yeah,
crazy.
our counter, well, like I say, from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock counted like 300, nearly 400 more birds in 3 hours there. That's a pretty heavy duty flight. So
Mm.
very exciting.
Cindy, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Margie, who who becomes a counter? How are they trained? What does it take to do that?
Yeah, there are no college degree programs for counting.
No,
You
but somebody has to
got,
know what they're doing.
yeah, you really do. You have to be able to identify the birds a long distance away. So yeah, you got to be a full bore bird nerd. That's what I call it. And you really have got to know all the birds by behavior of flight, by sound, and by sight. The counters stand on the platforms and count birds, and they start identifying 2 and 3 miles out.
Wow.
Um, by behavior and silhouettes. It's unbelievable. They are just incredibly skilled. I often get asked, how in the world do you count a kettle of 800 birds? And the secret to that is they don't count them when they're swirling around in that swarm of angry bees. They wait until, and what these birds are doing when they're riding the kettle, it's efficient flight. And for every mile they can rise vertically in one of those kettles, they can soar 7 horizontally. So it's all about efficient flight. And when they get to the top, I always tell the kids it's like taking an elevator. When you get to the top, what do? You get off and they start resuming their flight to the south or to the north at the top of the kettle, and they can count the stream fairly accurately.
Hmm.
So yeah, they don't count the swirlies because they can't count that, but you can count the stream.
So the kettles are a mixture of all kinds of birds, all kinds of.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, frequently. And the soarers and the flappers will be in the kettle too. It's just they won't be as efficient as the other soaring birds are. I always see the sharp-shinned hawks up there, and they're trying their best to soar with the big guys. And every now and again, you'll see flap, flap. This is just too good to be true. I can't be doing this. And then, yeah, and they flap. So yeah, it's fun to watch. Anybody?
So your funding is, I know you're a nonprofit, and do you get funding through the state or through Minnesota? Through Minnesota, I think you've got a grant through the LCCMR.
Yeah, we do
Did I
occasionally
get that right?
um have some grants. We currently don't have any federal grants going, I don't think, thankfully. We do have LCCMR, and we're constantly applying for more kinds of things. We'll sometimes, but yeah, we are totally a nonprofit, and we are supported by our membership base, and any grants and any, yep, you can come visit us. Um, yeah, I am more than happy to talk to master naturalists anytime, anywhere, and I don't mind doing the program for nothing. We ordinarily charge for this, but I'm happy to share with you. So give it back to Hawk Ridge. You can go online, you can make a donation, you can come visit in the fall and get yourself smart looking Hawk Ridge t-shirts and hats and things like that to support the work that we do, because that's how we continue to do what we're doing with donations and memberships. And yeah, and you can become a member too. You can do all of that stuff online on our website. So yeah, support us as you can, because yeah, it is an amazing thing that's happening up there, up here. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Margie. You have so much info. And obviously if people need to go, but if there are a few more questions, I know I have one. It looks like Michelle does. Cindy, you do. Go ahead, Michelle.
Actually, I'm clapping.
Oh, gotcha.
It wasn't a
Thank
raised
you.
hand. That was a clapping hand.
Okay.
Okay, got it. And Cindy, did you have a question?
Oh, I just wanted to give Margie the opportunity to talk about the trip to Tanzania. Is it Tanzania?
Oh,
Yeah, I do, like I say, get an opportunity to take birders on international trips, and I just did an amazing trip to Colombia. But yeah, the next one on the docket, I still have a few slots left for Tanzania in August. So if you've got any interest in going to Africa, it's the dry season in Africa and a good time to see all the birds and the wildebeest and all kinds of things. It's a peak season to go. So it's going to be a trip of a lifetime, more than likely for me. I may not get back there. I never imagined that I ever would, quite honestly, on a naturalist educator salary. But yeah, it's amazing. So if
How
you're
long will you?
interested, pardon. Okay, let me finish that thought and then
Yes, sorry.
you can add a comment there. Yeah, it's and now I can't remember what I was saying. That's okay.
Well, I was just curious how long that trip is, and I think you were going to say if people are interested, where to go to get
You're
info.
right. I
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a 2 week long trip. And from the 3rd of August to the 17th of August. And you can find information on our website about the international trips. There's there's a banner across the top that has beautiful picture of African birds there to inspire you to take a look. So that is up there. I typically do a trip in the late fall, late October, early November, and I typically do a trip in February, March vicinity. The Tanzania one is a little bit unusual being in August, but it's after the peak banding season before, and we'll have to find subs to handle the fall fall migration for a little bit, but there are always people around that might be willing to help out. So.
And are all of the people doing the counting volunteers?
No, we have paid counters too, usually. I think we're going to have a third this fall, which is good because it is a hardcore job from dawn to dusk. We always say we start before dawn and go until the birds stop flying or we can't see them anymore.
Yeah.
So it's a very yeah, it takes incredibly talented, but also incredibly dedicated people to do those jobs. Yeah.
And it's just binoculars, I imagine, like a spotting scope. The birds are moving too fast to.
Well, they do use
for that.
scopes to augment things, but like I say, most of them have been watching birds since the time they were knee-high to a grasshopper, and really know them inside and out and can recognize patterns in the flight and can do that sort of stuff. It is just an incredible skill, and it is not a common skill. So, yeah, no degree programs. It's all the school of hard knocks.
Yes. So any last questions? It looks like you're getting quite a few thank yous in the chat.
I love talking birds, so this is not a hard thing for me to do. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
I've actually kind of asked you about this at the beginning, but going up this weekend to see niece and to Duluth, that is, and was going to go with my daughter and her 14-month-old, and wondering if it's something that would be good for them, or is this?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know how cooperative the weather is going to be this weekend.
I
It
think it's
sounds,
Sunday. It looks like it's not raining then anyhow.
yeah, Sunday may be the best day of the bunch. It sounds like Saturday's just going to be wet.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, wet and maybe some snow rain mix later
fun.
on in the day. Yeehaw. Honestly, I'd rather have the snow, but there you go.
Mhm.
I don't think that's what we're gonna get, so yeah. On the other hand, I don't need a blizzard at this stage of the game.
No.
So we will see. That's just me. There are people who would rejoice if we had a blizzard, so there's always those who are ready, but I've had enough of spring already that, I mean, yeah, nearly 600 bald eagles in a single day,
Oh.
and this early in March is just unbelievable.
So, so Margie, if those bald eagles are just heading to their territory, when will their breeding season begin?
Well, you probably have been seeing bald eagle camps in St. Paul. That one's been going for a bit. These birds are flying further north for the most part. And so they're gonna be ready to step right on in. Bald eagles don't build a new nest, they just add to an old one. And some of them weigh several tons. Um,
I drove by one like that, and there was a bald eagle sitting on another branch next to it, and it was just this. The eagle is just minuscule next to the nest,
Mm.
but they do, yeah, they do come back and claim it. So,
they do.
so, I just don't know this about bald eagles. Do they stay paired? Are they kind of monogamous over from season to season? Do you even know?
Well, the thing is that yeah, I would say that the common talk is that some birds pair for life. That's comparatively rare. There's a fair amount of hanky-panky that goes on in the bird world, and the thought that a bird is, they've done enough studies on the DNA of young birds to know that there are multiple fathers in most nests.
Okay.
Um, so, and it doesn't seem to matter much what species they're looking at. I can't say for sure that they've proved that I mean, some of them really are seem to be tied to the same bird. But yeah, I can't tell you for sure on the bald eagles, but I'm guessing there's yeah, that would be if I was going to be a betting person, I would say yeah, maybe, maybe not.
Not so much.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Well, thank you again, Margie. Really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your vast knowledge. It's pretty
Oh, it's great
amazing.
fun. Good
Yeah,
fun. So thanks for coming out, folks, and hope to see you at the Ridge.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
See you
sure
in
you'll
the
see a lot
fall.
of us at some point.
Yeah.
Yes,
Make sure you
thank
come up
you.
and say hi.
Right. Thanks, Margie.
Yeah. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.